through the 7 emotional responses of the soul, the different triangles. So the last 2 times, not last week obviously, we talked about the two supportive, the right and the left of the supportive triangle, Netzach and Hod. So Netzach means resilience, determination, ambition, and so on. Sorry? Yeah. The last time, there's some papers over there on the table. That's it. Yeah. The last time we discussed Hod, as the Zohar says that Netzach and Hod are like two halves of one body, they're like twins. So Hod is a functional humility, kind of surrender that when nothing else works, we just know we have to give up and be humble and surrender to a higher purpose and a higher cause and a higher being, which is also the meaning of the Modeh Ani that we say in the morning, as we explained last time. Modeh is like Hoda'ah, Hod, same word. Now, like Netzach, although Netzach and Hod appear to be just very functional, like determination or humility, and they're not coming with a lot of passion, and they seem to be lower than Chesed and Gevurah, they actually come from a much deeper place. And it comes from a deeper place, a place which transcends our ego. It's always, even in the absence of emotion, even in the absence of feeling, we're able to do it. And we talked about the balance between Netzach and Hod. We based it on an idea that the Hasidic Rabbi, just to remind you, who had two pockets. In one it had the expression, I'm like nothing, I'm like dust. And the other one had the expression that the world was created for me. And we explained it's not about a balance, but actually one comes from the other. When we experience true humility, which doesn't mean that we're nothing, it means we're actually nothing independently, but we're actually part of a much greater being, we become greater and stronger, and therefore the unique mission that's given to each of us becomes very important, and the world indeed was created for us because we need to give and contribute what we need to do with netzach, with determination and ambition. We talked about healthy ambition, not healthy ambition, and so on. Okay, that's just a bit of review. Now just a couple of housekeeping things. Today's the last one of this series. Next week we're doing a special one, embarrassingly. But I'll explain next week why it's important to do anyway. And then I'm taking a break. I'm actually going overseas. For my actual Hebrew birthday, I will be overseas by the hopefully davening at the Rebbe's graveside, the oil. And then the first Thursday of the term, because we take a break during the holidays anyways, normally the school holidays. So the first Thursday morning of next term will be the 25th of July. I will send it around. Hopefully next week I'll announce the topic. I'm busy working out it. It's going to be an exciting term. I want to do a few different mini-series maybe. And there will be, next week I'll announce the topic, but it's the 25th of July. Okay. I think someone's phone is on podcast or something.
No, I think it's someone outside.
Oh, that's it. Oh, okay. Okay, no problem. Sounds like...
There's a lot of workmen around.
Okay. All right. So today, we do something very interesting. Today we're going to talk about the last two. The last two are connected, but they're not connected, but they're very different from the first 5. Right? So we've talked about Chesed and Gevurah, giving, holding back, the two primary emotions. Tiferet, the ability to combine them when we need to. Talk about Netzach, ambition, Hod, humility. Those are all feelings. Those are all emotional responses. Today we're going to talk about the last two, which is the left one of the second triangle, if you look at the back of your thing. It's Yisod, it's the middle one of the second triangle. And then the final one, if you see on the bottom, they're called Malchut. Yisod, the real literal translation of the word Yisod is foundation. I've translated it as bonding for reasons we'll soon see. And then Malchut, which means leadership, kingship, communication, sometimes it's called, and so on. Now, we're gonna explain everything. So it's number 6 and number 7. Now, the number 6 still belongs to the first sort of group, but it's very different. And then we have number 7, which is a completely different category, but it's part of the 7. All right. So, what is Yisod? What is Yisod? So Yisod, if you look in the Kabbalistic writings, you'll see that it's normally about the idea of what we call in Hebrew hashpa'ah, which is giving, to give, to share, to give. Which is very strange, because that's no different from all the other five, first of all. We explained that the idea of midot, the idea of emotions, by definition, is the idea of a response to something or someone that's happening outside of us, right? That was the difference between seichel, intellect, which is taking something from the outside and processing it, and then emotion, midot, are responding to the outside. So when we respond to the outside, it's a feeling, it begins with a feeling, but normally ends with something, like you have a feeling of kindness, so you help someone else, you're feeling of aggression, so you aggressive to someone else, you undermine someone else through jealousy, through aggression, whatever the case is, but all of the midot is about connecting to something, right? So why is Yesod? What is Yesod different? All of a sudden giving, and especially we need to understand that chesed, the first one of the midot, as we said, is chesed. And chesed is giving. Chesed is love, giving. We talked about that, right? Everything that's connected with me spreading to someone else is chesed. So why is Yesod differently? And what is Yesod? Why do we need another one that's called giving? But we're going to go through a very, very fundamental thing. You see, these last two traits that we're going to discuss today, Yesod and Malchus, are critical for real, healthy, emotional functioning and effective living. So, what we need to understand is the following. The first five emotions, which are the main emotions of a person, they're all feelings. They're all feelings which are feelings of response to something outside of me, but they don't always go beyond me. In other words, I have a feeling. I'm on a very simple level. On a very, very simple level, it's like I have a feeling I want to do kindness. Doesn't mean I'm going to do kindness, or it doesn't mean I'm even able to do kindness, right? In other words, by definition, the emotions we talked about before are all feelings which relate to the outside of me, but they're relating to the outside of me within me. Now let me give you an example so it's clear. Let's, with the exception of a few very heartless people, but let's say for the most part, every parent loves their child. And from time to time feels that love, right? I think that's fair to say. When push comes to shove, they'll do anything for their child. A parent loves their child. Does that mean that there's always an expression of that love? No. As we see, very often. Very often, a parent appears to be very disconnected from the child. Very often, a parent doesn't know how to express the love. Doesn't express it in the proper way. It's not very effective. Right? So they might have the love, and even when they might even feel the love. They might be very proud of the child when they do something nice, so they do something. They might be proud of success. They might all that, and yet so many times we find parents and children have that conflict where children kind of say they never received love, they never felt love, it's never been communicated to them, it's never been around, right? So the parent will feel the love, and that feeling is a feeling about something outside of them. It's about the child, right? But it doesn't mean it ever left the parent. It's a feeling about the child within the parent. You follow? Now, let's understand this a little bit deeper. This concept of giving, right? Of giving is actually a very difficult concept. You see, because normally when you think about giving, it's not a big deal, so you give, right? You share. But actually sharing and giving and expressing to the outside of me is not that easy, because we know that God created each creation with a set of definition and with a very, very deep sense of self and a very, very deep sense of self-protection. Right? It's not an easy thing for a human being. I know we think it's simple, or it should be simple. It's not an easy thing to leave oneself. Okay? It's not an easy thing to leave oneself. Even when it means giving love. Especially when it means that for me to give to someone else requires me to change. Requires me to do things that are difficult for me. That are maybe not my default way of doing things. Then we go back to that example of the parents. Every parent loves their child, but sometimes to love the child, you actually have to understand the child's a very different being than you. This is the mistake lots of parents make. I'm using parent and child because it's a very easy example to use, but it's with every relationship and everything, right? Often the mistake parents make is that children are not clones of themselves. Children are very, very different than themselves. Which means to really express love to the child is difficult in an effective way. It means me leaving myself, but not just leaving myself, leaving my mindset a little bit. Going beyond myself, which is a very, very difficult thing to do. Right? You might have I'll give you another example. You might have, for example, a very, very, very brilliant person who loves to share knowledge. Right? But loves to share knowledge when it's on his or her terms. So, for example, you might have a very, very, very smart person who cannot explain anything to someone who's not smart. Because it doesn't work for me. It doesn't, you know what I'm saying? A true teacher is someone who can explain something to anyone. And we'll see why. We'll see what the difference is. So you're gonna. So let's say. So you're gonna have two people. All right. Both very knowledgeable, and both love sharing. Which means they got a lot of chesed. They don't want to hold their knowledge to themselves. They want to share the knowledge, right? But the one can do it to anyone, and the one can only do it to people who are on their level, in their world, and will understand what they're talking about. So the person who can only do it to the person that will understand them, can only do it to a person who's on their equal level and can relate to what they're talking about and are also very clever and very smart and will get it right away. What's that? And to that person, that academic or that brilliant person will share tons of knowledge, but they can't do it to someone who's on a lesser level. What are they missing? Chesed? No, not missing chesed. But they are missing Yesod. Yesod, that's what we're talking about now. We'll soon see. Why? Because when that person gives and is full of chesed, and not only is full of chesed inside, but the chesed has even left them because they're sharing it with lots of smart people, right? It doesn't really leave them. In other words, they're only sharing it to people that still fit into their being. Because to go beyond your own being is very difficult. Follow? So what is it? So the Rav Shneur Zalman of Ladi, he writes a very fascinating description of this concept of Yesod, and he said the following. He said, an example of Yesod would be the following. He said, take the connection that a father has when he's teaching a child. He's teaching his child, right? But listen to this description properly, and I'm going to explain it. The father is teaching the child, and he's connecting his intellect with the child's intellect, right? And when he's learning with him, he's doing it with love, with desire, because he really wants his child to understand. And without that love and desire, even if the child would hear everything the father is saying, the child wouldn't understand it. Only now he understands it because he connects him and he's talking to him mouth to mouth, face to face, with love, with desire, because he really wants his child to understand. And the more the desire and the pleasure that the father has, the more he'll be able to teach his young son. Now let's understand that. The concept didn't change. The love did. The desire did. The connection did. What's going on here? So what's going on here is this. It goes back to the two examples of that two smart people I was talking about before. Obviously, the father sharing with the child is because the child doesn't understand at the same level as the father, clearly, right? You know, I was going through this. I reminded myself of a maths teacher I had in high school, a very, very brilliant man, but really was in the wrong job because I never understood anything he was saying. Now, I'm not that great. Maths is not my area of strength, but I did have maths teachers in my thing that I used to really explain it well and I could understand it, right? This guy was so brilliant. I remember him. I just have this thing. He would turn to the board and he would have these algebra equations and things like that. And he would very, very quickly write them on the board. And he would turn around, you got it? I say, no. And then he'd get angry. So he wanted to teach. He wanted to share knowledge. But he had no clue. Why? You see, because the first 5 emotions are feelings of things that happen within you in response to other people, but still within you, and they haven't left you yet, right? So if it's an easy give, in other words, if the giving is easy, meaning it's to someone that I'm very comfortable with, it's someone that's obvious, or someone that's not going to affect me, it's not going to affect me in any way. I'm not going to have to do anything. So I'll give you another example. Let's say someone is just a very generous person, right? And because I want to, it's not only when someone's close to you, it could be even someone's far from you, but it's an easy give. Someone who's very wealthy and very, very generous, and he's just that kind of person, right? There's no problem meeting anyone in the street and helping them out, right? But it doesn't. But that person might be a bad father. Why? It's such a kind person. Might be a bad spouse or whatever, because the person is full of chesed. And the full of chesed is, someone comes to him, needs a donation, yes, $1,000, no problem. You want to lift, no problem. But it doesn't affect me. I don't have to go out of myself. It's nice, it's kind, it's beautiful. But I haven't really changed myself. I'm still in my own world. So chesed is enough. I don't need yisod. But when it's a hard give or a distant give, where you need to work out how to give, you need to work out, what am I going to give? What's the best way to communicate with the other person? What's the best way to understand the other person, to really, right? What does that person really need? That's a whole different thing. In other words, it's exactly what Rav Shnei Zalman is saying. When a father is teaching a child and it's done with cheshek, with an excitement, with a love for the child, with a connection with the child, there's a relationship there, then he can teach his child. He wants just to preach, nothing's going to happen. Yes, someone of his own level will understand, but not the child. Right? And that's what Yisod is. Yisod means creating a connection, right? Creating a relationship, a bond with the person I want to give to, in order to eventually be able to give. We're not finished there because it's still Malchut, but this is a very, very important thing, right? Shlomo HaMelech, sometimes it takes a person who's extremely wise to be able to do this. Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, it says he was the wisest of all men, and yet he could explain anything to anyone. Why? There's a verse that says, even though his wisdom was far beyond anyone really, but he was able to do that, and the Pasuk says, there's a verse that says that, it says, Vayedaber, and he spoke, Shloshim Alfei Mashal. He spoke 3,000 parables, analogies. He gave examples and he brought it down to one level, another level, another level, another level, until the person was able to understand. Right? Why? Because he had a relationship with the people. Another way to put it perhaps is this. Chesed is kindness. Yesod is empathy. Very different. Understand? I mean, not always you need empathy, but when you need empathy, that's the difference between chesed and yesod. Chesed means, you want something, I'll give it to you. You want me to take out the garbage, I'll take out the garbage. You want me to $100, I'll give you $100, right? That's chesed. That's because I haven't left myself. Empathy means that I build a relationship with someone so I am in their shoes. I'm in their world. I'm attracted to their world. I understand their world. And therefore I'm ready to give to their world. To their world. Not just give from my world, to give to their world. I'm ready to go beyond myself. Is that clear? So it's about building a relationship before we give, right? It's a very interesting thing, because I shouldn't do this, but sometimes I study people because I'm interested in right? And I've come across people in my experience who are phenomenally kind people, and they're also the most difficult people to be around. It's interesting. And in thinking about it, this is what I came to. They have a lot of chesed, but they don't have a connection to anyone outside of themselves. It's their chesed. Now you need chesed also to have you. Sorry? Yeah, but they're very kind. They'll. You want something, but it's on their terms. Chesed on their terms. It could be an amazing chesed, amazing kindness, amazing generosity, but it's on their terms. Haven't left themselves. They haven't really understood the other person. Okay? That's why the same thing, it comes like love. Love can be that way. Sometimes there's a lot of love, and that's chesed, but it's love on the person's terms. It's not complete selfless love. Selfless love, you need empathy. You need to understand the other person. You need to really know what they need. Right? So that's what Yisod is. Yisod is after you have all these 5 emotions. So until Hod is the primary 5 emotions that we have. The most important are Chesed and Gvura. You have Tiferet, you have Netzach, you have Hod, ambition, holding back. All these things are in place in your world. Now, if you want to actually start the process of actually putting them into action in an effective way, step 1 is you have to build relationships with the ones who you want to give to. The ones who you want to express your first 5 midot to, you need to build relationships with them. You need to have a connection with them. Very fascinating. Before we get to Malchut, I've told you this many times that Kabbalistically we talk about the physical body being a vehicle for the 10 powers of the soul, correct? So the head is the seat of intellect. Then Chesed and Gvura is the right hand and the left hand. Tiferet is the abdomen, like the core of the deep part of the ego, bringing them together. Chesed and Gvura, as we explained a few weeks ago. The 2 legs are Netzach, 2 thighs, 2 legs are Netzach and Yehod, because they support of Midot. Ambition and humility, they support, they hold up. And Yesod is the male sexual organ. That's what it says in Kabbalah. Because that's the giving. That's the intimacy, the male part. The male part of being ready to have a connection, being ready to be intimate, being ready to give in a very close way. But what that means emotionally, right? In other words, that's worth nothing. That physical intimacy is worth nothing unless there's an attraction, unless there's love, unless there's a real connection. And that's what Yesod is. Yesod is that making that connection. Which that connection and that place, that area of the body is the organ of giving. Right? Even physically, right? It's the organ of the male genitalia which gives to the feminine, right? And we'll talk about what Malchut is in a second. Okay, so that's Yesod. However, after Yesod, you need the final one. That's Malchut. Okay. In other words, Malchut is about actually making it happen. So Malchut is called leadership. It's sometimes called communication. It's sometimes called sovereignty and kingship. So I'm going to explain all that soon. But let me just say this. Let me just tell you a line. I'm going to throw out a line, and I'm not going to explain it, and I'm going to come back and explain it soon. But there's 7 midot, Chesed to Yesod. Yesod is a very critical one. Yesod means I'm ready now to leave myself and to make a connection. But the first 6 are called the masculine part of the masculine energy of our emotions. Malchut is called the feminine. Okay? Now we'll come back to that in a second. So let's have a look. Because even after Yesod, even if I have connection, I have empathy, and I understand what the other person needs, and I know their world, and I'm ready to connect, and I'm ready to give, that's not enough. There's still something else that needs to happen. And what is it? Implementation, execution. It's got to actually happen. It's got to be processed, it's got to actually happen. For example, you can find people who have chesed, and then you can find people who have chesed and even yesod. So they have empathy, there's connection, there's a willingness, there's an understanding of the world, right? There's a selflessness, there's everything in place. And yet, with all the good intentions, it doesn't happen, right? It just doesn't effectively happen. There's no communication, there's no, right? Just a lack of ability to implement, to execute, to actually make it actually happen on the ground, right? Why? Because there's no malchut. So what is malchut? So malchut is this concept of leadership. What's the idea of a leader, right? We said this before. Is a leader smarter than everyone else? No. Is a leader more emotionally healthy than other people? Not necessarily. But a leader knows how to take everything that they have and make it happen. They've got this ability that everything they have is processed, worked out, communicated, and implemented. That's what malchut is. So we have a very, very interesting thing. The Kabbalistic writings write that malchut is not an emotion. The expression that's given is let la migarba klum. It doesn't have its own emotion at all. Why? All the others is a feeling of emotion. There's a feeling of chesed, a feeling of teferet, a feeling of humility, a feeling of determination. Even yesod, there's a feeling of connection, right? Willingness to connect. Malchut doesn't have any emotion. Why? Because what is malchut? By definition, malchut is about absorbing all the other emotions, processing it, and making it happen. So, let's understand this. The best way to understand this, I think, is to use the analogy that's sometimes given for malchut, and that is the power of communication. The power of effective communication is essentially malchut. What is that? We know that in order to, we know communication is the key to an effective relationship, right? It's the key to getting something out of my world to someone else's world, right? In other words, even after empathy and feeling and everything like that, I still have to communicate it. So what happens when I communicate it? When I communicate something, by example, I take something that I'm thinking and I'm feeling, that I'm passionate about, that I'm excited about, that everything of that, right? Or a concept that I understand that is just beautiful, and I want to share it with you, or want to share it with a small child that's totally different to me, and so on and so forth. And I know I've got to hold back some of the complexities, and I know what the child needs, I know how the child thinks, I know the child learns, but now I've got to put it all into words. Okay. So some people are just better communicators than others, right? But let's say a really good, effective communicator, what actually happens when I communicate it? I put everything that is in my emotional structure into words, right? What are the words? Is the word an emotion? Is the word a concept? No. I can sit here, I can stand here and say a bunch of words that make no sense whatsoever, and I'm not conveying any content. So what are the words? I'm not conveying any feeling or any idea or any concept if I just make up rubbish words, right? So what am I doing? I'm taking everything that's within me and I'm putting it into a mechanism that will process what I'm thinking and feeling and carry it to you. So really the words are only as good as the content that I put into the words, correct? Yeah, does that make sense? Yeah. In other words, if I'm going to explain to you a really, really deep idea, the words are not going to create the idea, right? My intellect creates the idea. So what do the words do? The words have an amazing ability. They take whatever I'm putting it into, they break it up into sentences, they give it clarity, they hold back. Sometimes they break down a thought. I could have a thought, that's what the difference between thought and speech, right? Sometimes I can have one tiny thought that will take me half an hour to say. Because the way I feel it and get it is too, it's not communicable. So communication has to take it, has to turn it into sentences, to words, to paragraphs, to essays, whatever the case is, and then communicated further in a broken down, orderly, processed way, where everything is structured and put into proper sentences, and each idea, each part of the idea is in its right place, in its right sequence, and then you hear the whole thing, and you get it. Right? It's an amazing ability. That's Malchut. That's Malchut. That's what Malchut is. Malchut is not an emotion. It's the power that takes all the other emotions, processes it, and gives birth. Makes it happen. Right? That's why in Kabbalah, the first 6 midot are called masculine, and the 7th is Malchut. And the 7th Malchut is feminine. Because everything that happens in the physical world is a manifestation of what's happening in the spiritual world, and that's exactly what happens with the power of the femininity, which is in the physical world, in the world of reproduction. That's exactly what happens. The sperm which is absorbed by the female takes something which is an idea, a concept, which nothing can happen from it, but absorbs it, processes it, nurtures it, carries it, and after 9 months gives birth to a new life. That's the feminine ability. Right? Now here's the thing. If you look in the order of Sfirot, if you look in the order, the Kabbalistic order of right, where's Malchut? At the bottom. Right? But Kabbalah teaches us, why is it at the bottom? Because on the surface, it's only as good as what you give it, it's only as good as what you put into it. Both in the physical and the spiritual, right? And the intellectual and the emotional. It's only going to communicate an emotion if I put the emotion into the words. Yes, it will be the vehicle to carry it to you and to give birth to a new connection, a new relationship, a new idea, a new concept, a new communicated emotion, whatever the case is. But it's only as good as what I put into it. But, so it's just carrying, it doesn't have its own emotion, it just carries what it's given. Yet in Kabbalah it says that power has a much deeper and a much greater and higher origin than any other thing within my experience. Because that power to give birth to something outside of me, I'm talking about even intellectually or emotionally, is the greatest power of all. And that's why it says Kabbalistically, and now's not the time to go into what this means in detail, but Kabbalistically, the feminine energy comes from a higher source than the masculine energy. Even though in process, what it's actually doing is just taking the masculine energy and giving birth to something from it, but actually it comes from a higher source. I just gave a shir lately, this is totally off the topic, but it's just cute. I gave a shir on Shavuot night. It was Shavuot night, sometimes late, I give a shir, sometimes I choose something that's a bit controversial maybe, or, that will excite people, something like that, middle of the night. So I talked about changes that people are making to chuppahs lately. All kinds of acrobatics to make it more inclusive, to make it this, to make it that. And I'm a big traditionalist, so I don't go well with these kind of things. But, right? Meaning I try to, connect all sorts of different people, but there's certain things that have to be kept in authentic, right? So I gave you an example. I said people need to understand why we do things sometimes so that they won't want to change it, right? So we have this thing where people, the bride and groom come at a chuppah, right? So we know that there's a famous custom that the bride comes down the aisle and then circles the chatan 7 times, right? Goes around the... So lately there's been a move in some circles, some communities. Not a lot yet, but that, we need equality. So what they do is, instead of the bride going around the groom 7 times, we want the bride to go around the groom 3.5 times, and the groom will go around the bride 3.5 times, right? So besides the principle, like if it ain't broken, don't fix it. Like we've been doing weddings with this for centuries and centuries and centuries. No need to make any changes, right? It's working. It's good. It's a good system, and every custom, everything beautiful thing out of the chuppah has meaning and purpose, and it's come from great people, and so on and so forth. Besides that general idea, it's just an example of when people don't study something, right? So why does the bride go around the groom 7 times? Okay, so the concept of circles represents infinite energy and so on. But one of the reasons is because there's a verse in the Tanakh that says that when Mashiach will come, the transcendent nature of the feminine energy will become apparent, will be revealed. It says, Nekeva testsovev gever. The female will encompass, transcend the male. And the symbol of revealing it at a chuppah, because the chuppah is such a holy moment, and it's a bit of a preview for the Mashiach's times, that's why the color, the bride goes around the chatan, encircling, which is a symbol of infinity and transcendence, similar to what will be revealed when Mashiach comes, which is the highest source of the feminine energy. So why would you want to break that? Why would you want to change that to make women more involved? Like, it doesn't make any sense. This is about the feminine energy being stronger. So you wouldn't want to compromise it, right? Anyway, just an interesting little thing. Okay. But I just want to bring it out because, now it's interesting because this is why people, right? I think I've told you this many times before. At the beginning of Chumash, where we talk about the creation of the first human being, right? It says that Vayipach be'apav nishmat chayim, that God blew into the nostrils of Adam a soul of life. And then it says, Vayihi Adam lenefesh chaya, and the person became a living spirit. And there's something in the Chumash called the Targum. I've mentioned this before. There's an Aramaic translation that was written by one of the great Talmudists, written with divine inspiration. And normally it's a quite literal translation into Aramaic. Once in a while he makes nuance changes where you can see how he's interpreting the verse. And on this verse where it says, and the man became a living soul, he says, Vatehi Adam l'ruach b'malala. He became a speaking spirit. We're talking about the creation of the human being as a whole. The blowing of the nostrils, into the nostrils, the soul of life, which God blew into the nostrils of the human being. In other words, and the Zohar says, when it says God's blew, it means there's no physical form of God, but it means he gave of himself, he gave of his infinity, he gave of his energy. He gave the person a godly infusion. What is the essence of this godly infusion? Speech. And in Kabbalah there's an expression, hanefesh mele'ah otiyot. The deep-rooted essence of the soul is filled with words. Now again, it's a very strange thing. What do you mean it's filled with words? Words are nothing. They're only as good as the content you put into them. And the answer is that's not true. Because this ability, yes, it doesn't have its independent emotion. It's taking something else that you give it, but that ability to carry something beyond the human creation. In other words, that ability that that I have within myself to not just have an intellectual idea, not just have a feeling, not just to want to do kindness, not just to want to have empathy and so on, but that ability, that mechanism that I have within myself, which is the feminine part of the self, which is to instill the emotion, and that mechanism will then carry it outside of me into a different world. That is the most powerful force. That gives the human being ultimately the ability to go beyond themselves. That gives the teacher the ability to explain to a third grade something very simple. That gives a spouse the ability to relate to his or her spouse even when they're very, very different. Even if it means totally giving up from themselves a little bit. That gives the power for absolute selflessness. That gives the power to give and to be and to express the empathy in an effective way, to make sure it actually happens, to implement it. Because implementation means I can have the best intention, I can have the best levels of empathy within myself, but if I can't execute it, if I can't actually put it into practice, I haven't gone beyond myself, even with Yesod. Yeah.
Intuition coming to it. Intuition.
A little bit. You sometimes use intuition for this, but we've talked about intuition before. It's not always a good idea to trust your intuition, because it depends where it's coming from. Right? Sometimes it's coming from the ego, not from the selflessness. But anyway, that's a separate discussion. But yeah, intuition often does mean that, right? But that's what a good communicator. That's why it's communication, but it's not just communication. It's also action. It's about implementing. It's actually getting things done. The same idea is implemented. In other words, it's taking the good idea, the concept, the theory, the creation, the creativity, whatever it is that I've created within myself, and putting it through a processing machine to make sure it actually happens, to make sure it actually goes beyond and outside of myself. And that is the essence of the human being. The essence of the human being is a relationship. The essence of the human being is to go beyond myself. The essence of the human being is to be able to connect with someone or something else. Whether it's a person or an experience or God, for that matter. That is what the human being is. That's why hanefesh melei otiyot. That's why the soul is filled with letters, because the deepest power ultimately. It seems like it's something that doesn't have anything of its own, it's just taking from something else. But actually, it's the deepest power within the human being. Malchut. Idea of Malchut. That's why we have a Rosh Hashanah. This whole imagery where we call God king and we crown him as king. Why do we do that? Why do we have the imagery of a king? Right? You know that Rosh Hashanah is all about king. We call our God HaMelech, HaMelech, HaMelech all the time. But that's how God created the world, and we want him to do it again. We want him to keep being our king. What does it mean? What does it mean that God is our king? It means he's completely transcendent, he's infinite, and yet he relates to and he creates and he engages with a world and people that are infinitely lower than him. By holding back what he needs to hold back and giving what he needs to give, because he understands us. That's why the creative power, Kabbalistically we talk about the creative power, the way God created the world, is the concept of Malchut. We say it every day in davening. That God created, he is the melech of the world, he's the king of the world. What does it mean, the king of the world? Not that he's a dictator in power and he's a big boss. That's not what it means. It means he's a melech, he has that ability to engage, to connect, and to give. But give in practice, not just in theory. To give birth to another experience, other, so to speak, outside of him. Even though nothing's really outside of God, but outside of his revelation. Right? That's the power of Malchut. Interestingly, by the way, this power, by the way, it's the most important power that we have. Otherwise, nothing gets done, especially in Judaism. Judaism is a religion of power, of action. Intention is very important, emotion is very important, it's all very important. But if you can't make it happen, it's a problem. And that manifests in everything that we do. Most of what Yiddishkeit stands for is not... Yeah, we have davening, that's the service of the heart. We have learning, that's the experience of the brain. Very, very important. Without that, you can't do action. But ultimately, it's about helping the other person. It's about putting a mezuzah on the door. It's about the Shabbos candle. It's about the mitzvah, whether between man and man or man and God, whatever the case is. But it's about the action, right? That's what Judaism is about. So, Malchut. It's about. You got to have intention, you got to have feeling, you got to have commitment, you got to have ambition, you got to have humility. All that will make it happen, but it's got to happen. Right? It's true, when it says when a person does, even if the intention is lacking, it's so important. We learn in Pirkei Avot, it says action is the most important thing, and we learn that the Talmud says that when you do a mitzvah, let's say you do a mitzvah without any feeling, like you didn't get excited. Let's say you just put a mezuzah, but you didn't relate to it or anything like that. So it's a bad thing. It's like a body without a soul. That's what it says. Like the soul is the intention, the feeling, and the action is the body, right? How about the other way around? If you had full intention and you really loved the whole experience and you meditated on it, but you didn't actually put the mezuzah on the door, right? That's just nothing. It's a nice idea, not meditative experience, but you didn't actually do anything, right? Right, no, that's right. You have to have the scroll. Exactly, of course. Yeah. But it's not the frills. It's the scrolls. The scrolls are most important. You remind me of that story about the person who renovated his house and he came back one day and the painter said, "I've done you a big favor. All those things you had, all those new things you're going to put on the door. We took out all the instructions and threw them away." No, you need exactly that's it. By the way, an interesting thing just before we finish, and that is. When God created the world, we know that he created it to correspond to these 7 emotions, right? So the 6 days are the first 6 midot, chesed to yesod. Monday is chesed and Friday is yesod. What's Shabbat? Malchut. Right? Why? How does that work? For the same thing. Because there's a purpose to creation. So God created a world, that's true, it's there. But his presence is hidden. The purpose is hidden. The oneness of God, the creative power of God is hidden. It's all potentially there. When is the purpose given birth to? When is it revealed? On Shabbat. Right? That's why Shabbat is feminine. That's why Shabbat in the Chadadi is called the Kala, the bride. Because, yes, Shabbat isn't independent. Shabbat is taken for all the 6 weeks, it's all the 6 days. What Shabbat does is, it takes all the 6 days and lifts it up and elevates it, reveals the purpose, gives birth to the meaning of the 6 days. That's why Shabbat is holier day, because it brings holiness. The holiness is given birth to on Shabbat. The holiness of what? Not just of Shabbat, it's the holiness of all the 6 days. So we understand what the purpose and meaning behind all the 6 days is. That's why, by the way, that the special feminine mitzvah on Shabbat is lighting candles. Now, by the way, lighting candles is not just women, you know that. If a man is living alone for Shabbat, or his wife's away, I've had this many times, my wife is away for Shabbat, I have to light candles, because it is a mitzvah to have candles in the house on Shabbat. Nevertheless, the mitzvah of doing it actually was given to the woman. That's why it's a feminine mitzvah. Why? Because lighting candles on Shabbat is very much a feminine concept. What happens when you light candles? What changes? Nothing, actually.
You can say your own prayers.
Yeah, you could. That's what you can do. But I'm saying, what actually happens when you light a candle in a dark room? Right? It reveals what was there. It reveals the potential. Everything else was there beforehand. The candle is not bringing anything new, but it's doing something that's creative. It's taking something from the world of potential into a world of practice, into a world of openness, like birth. Similar sort of idea, right? We'll talk about this next week about birthdays, but same idea. Why do we make such a tzimmus when someone is born? The baby was there before, like yesterday. The baby was there too. Why? So we'll explain more next week. Actually, it's a very important concept, but same idea, because it was all there. It was a concept beforehand. Like it's there, but it's not functional. It hasn't been implemented. It hasn't been revealed. The birth is when the thing is revealed. It's new, right? That's the power of Malchut. And it's that power of Malchut that completes the whole cycle of the 7. So just to summarize, we have our first 5. Those are the building blocks of our emotional structure, which obviously, again, manifests. There are many emotions. If you look at any psychology book, you'll see there's tons of emotions, but they're all rooted Kabbalistically in these 5. And that's chesed to hod, right? So it's chesed, it's gvura, it's the ability to combine, it's determination, it's humility, and so on. And then starts the process of actually bringing it out and making it happen. Step 1 of the process is the 6th one. It's the masculine, the end of the masculine one. It's the final way where it's not just I feel kind, but I'm able now to make a relationship and a connection with someone, so I understand what's needed. There's an attraction, there's going to be a bonding. And then there's the actually happening, which is the feminine energy, where I put it through this mechanism, whether it's speech, whether it's action, whatever the case is, it's processed, it's worked out, and it's the ability to actually then give birth to it and actually make it happen on the ground. And that is the summary of the emotional structure of the human being. So thanks for listening. Last week, again, next week, don't forget, is a different topic. Sorry? Yeah. But that's part of what we're talking about. Not just having the knowledge. Yeah, exactly. Correct. That's true. That's exactly right.